Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Dear Church small group study. This is week number 2 of 4, and tonight we are spending our time talking about how we drift away from Jesus. I said tonight very confidently because most small groups meet at night. So if you're meeting in the morning or the afternoon, I promise I'm not excluding you. My small group experience is usually in the evenings. Anyway, let's talk about how we drift away from Jesus. What did you think about that icebreaker question? Is anyone in your group just like kind of known for being bad with directions and you just kind of get lost a lot? I'm sure there are some of you. I have to say, I'm weirdly good with directions. Both my parents are, so I think I just kind of got that. I don't know if that's a genetic thing, but that's what I'm citing as why I'm good with directions. I'm really not good with like street names, but if I've been somewhere before, I can get back to that place off of memory almost every single time. But I remember one time as a kid getting lost. In the house that I grew up in, it was on a street. It wasn't in a neighborhood. It was just kind of a line of houses. And so there was a house here, my house, another house, and then a big cornfield. And so most of you can already pretty much figure out where this story is going. But in my house, and then the one next to me, they had some kids similar age, so we would kind of hang out sometimes. And there was one day that kind of that group of kids had wandered over to the cornfield. And we just decided, let's go in. We were playing some game, who knows what. So let's go into the cornfield. Let's have some fun, because why wouldn't you? You're a kid and nothing bad's going to happen. And there's no parents around, right? So we go into the cornfield and we kind of start playing whatever game we were playing as we're going through this cornfield, and we're exploring and we're doing all these things. And pretty quickly we realized that we couldn't get out. We kept changing direction every couple minutes. We were trying to figure out, I think we came that way, but we couldn't really tell. It was the time of year when cornfields are especially thick. And so very quickly the sun started to go down, and we just kind of panicked and started screaming and yelling for help. And after a while of doing this, we stumbled out. We found our way out. Everything was okay. Nothing too serious happened. But I just remember those feelings. I was probably 6 or 7, maybe. And I still remember the feelings of being stuck in that cornfield. I remember the panic and the dread of, oh my gosh, I think I'm lost and I don't know what to do. One time I got lost at a grocery store. This isn't even written down. I just remember this. My mom told me to go get something out of a different aisle. I went to that aisle. I went back to where I thought she was going to be. She wasn't there. I freaked out. I went to the customer service desk and I had them call my mom on the loudspeaker. And she wasn't the happiest with me because she was where she was supposed to be. I just heard it wrong. But when you think about times in your life of being lost or feeling lost, what are some of the feelings that you're reminded of? Panic, anxiety, fear, maybe this feeling of just wanting to get out of the situation or back on track by any means necessary. In some ways that we get lost physically, it's similar that we actually can get lost spiritually. And the scary, scary part when we're talking about drifting away from Jesus spiritually is that it doesn't happen suddenly. Like, it would be one thing if you woke up one day and made one bad decision and suddenly you're so far off the course of what Jesus wants for your life and you're just kind of like, okay, that happened so fast, so maybe I'll just quickly get back on track. That would be one thing. But the reality is that it's always a slow drift. And what happens is then you kind of wake up one day and you kind of blink and you realize you're so far away from Jesus that you don't know how you got there. You can't even hear him in your life. You don't know the last time you've spent time with him. You haven't touched your Bible in 6 months. You're no longer going to church consistently. You're out of a small group or a community that's holding you accountable. It's this slow drift that just leads you away from the ways of Jesus. And I think if Paul was writing Sycamore Creek a letter in 2025, I think he would call out this idea of spiritual drift. And I think he would encouragingly kind of tell us and remind us that we need to guard against actively spiritual drift in our lives. So as we're walking through this imaginary kind of experiment of what Paul would say to us, we have to understand something about Paul and all of his letters in the New Testament. Paul was never afraid to call out the churches that he loved to a higher standard. We kind of talked about this last week. But through grace and truth, Paul would remind us, I think, he would say something along the lines of, you were running so well after Jesus. What happened? What got in the way? I think he would kind of ask us this question for reflection for all of us individually and in community of, man, remember those times of being on fire for Jesus. What got in the way? And I think he would ask us to reflect and try to think about what has caused us to drift away from Jesus. Here's something to consider tonight as you begin your discussion. When it comes to our spiritual lives, there is no standing still. What I mean by this is you are either moving towards Jesus or away from Jesus. Every day of your life, every action, every thought, every decision, every hobby, every TV show, every post, every news headline, it is forming you into some kind of person. The question is not, am I being formed? The question is, who am I being formed into? Is this thing that I'm doing, is it making me more like Jesus, or is it causing me to drift away from Jesus? Everything in your life has spiritual power. Everything in your life is causing you to drift one way or the other. There is no standing still when it comes to spiritual matters. You are proactively working towards being like Jesus, or you're drifting away from his leading and his voice in your life. So where are you tonight? Where am I? Can we be honest about this stuff? Can we really recognize and have awareness and say, I've drifted from who Jesus wants me to be, and here's what I think has caused me to get there. So as we head into discussion tonight, here's a question to get you going. Is there an area of your life where you've settled for spiritual survival instead of spiritual growth? Jesus has called you to a life and life abundantly, and he's called you to spiritual growth every single day. Every day, every week, every month, and year after year, we should look more like Jesus. Where are the areas in our life that we've kind of just settled for, yeah, I'm kind of just surviving. I'm kind of just checking a box. I'm kind of just getting by. And how can we stop that drift? Thanks so much for watching. Hope your discussion is encouraging and challenging, and we'll see you next week.